So I played the first Bioshock and its remastered versions back to back a while ago. I've played them a couple times in the past, first time when the original was released in 2007 on Xbox 360. Game has actually been released as original and remastered now on Windows, Xbox 360, PS3, Mac and Switch. By now I assume most people know what kind of a game Bioshock is, but if not, don't worry, I'm going to talk about the gameplay, graphics, reception and plot in this review. Plot is something I will talk in the end, and I will let you know when plot talk starts. Minor spoilers might be included while talking other stuff about it. I also played Bioshock 2, Bioshock Infinite with the 2 necessary DLCs for the story, and I have to say it makes me appreciate the story of the whole trilogy much more, playing them again. Infinite wraps the trilogy in such a good way that I really enjoyed it. Before I start, I want to talk shortly about the difference between original and remastered versions. Bioshock Remastered is an updated version of the original Bioshock game released in 2016 for PC, Xbox One and PlayStation 4. I do think there's a Switch version too, but I am not sure. The remastered version features an updated graphics, improved lighting and textures, and support for higher resolutions and frame rates, which though doesn't always look better, but the game also runs at higher frame rate, which makes the gameplay feel smoother and more responsive. Another difference between the two versions of the game is the addition of new gameplay features and quality of life improvements in the remastered version. For example, players can now use quick save features to save the progress at any time, and there are additional graphic settings allowing players to customize the look to their liking. For example, field of view was an extremely good improvement. Overall, while the original Bioshock is still classic and enjoyable game to play, the remastered version offers more technically impressive and polished gameplay experience. If you're a fan of the series or interested in playing the game for the first time, the remastered version is the recommended way for me to experience Bioshock, mainly due to the original being so taped together as a feeling. So let's talk about the gameplay. Bioshock is a first-person shooter that incorporates elements of role-playing games and some would say survival horror, though I disagree with this. There are ammunition collecting and such reserving, but mostly no. The players use a variety of weapons set in fictional 1960s world and plasmids, which are genetic enhancements that let you shoot, for example, lightning to stun enemies and set them on flames, to fight off enemies and explore environment. The game has very black and white moral choice system, which is extremely simple to select if you want good or a bad ending. I enjoyed the gun variation and upgrades in Bioshock, however it's a shame that many of the plasmids seem worthless. While the game does offer a variety of plasmids that can be used to approach combat and exploration in different ways, some players may find themselves sticking to a few that work well in most situations. For example, insect swarm seems pointless to distract enemies when you can set them in flames or shock with electricity to distract them out of their lives. There is a huge variety of plasmids and gene modification in Bioshock 1, though, so if you really want to play a certain way, it definitely lets you do that, although it's less than optimal most of the time. Offering wide range of weapons that are each distinct in their design and use, from the standard pistol to more exotic chemical thrower, which is basically a flamethrower with ice and electricity options, which by the way all of the guns have very useful alternative ammunitions. You have a lot of options when it comes to taking down enemies. Additionally, the upgrades for each weapon add another layer of customization, allowing players to tailor their arsenal to their preferred playstyle. The alternative ammunition and camera to research enemies to be able to make extra damage and learn new plasmids like camouflage, which lets you become invisible if you stand still, are interesting, and in the end additions that I did like as running out of certain special ammunition and having to change either ammo or weapon completely does make a nice and tight situations in the game. There are clearly best and worst weapons in the game, though you can affect this by changing your build overall between plasmids, gene tonics, and regular terms passive in regular terms passive perks changes and ammunition. One of the strengths of Bioshock is its immersive world building, and that is just the thing that made me enjoy the game, even though I played it 2 times in a row as original and remastered. It was every time fascinating, as every time you notice small details here and there more. This extends to the gameplay mechanics as well. The plasmids and the genes that players can acquire are all tied to the lore and history of Rapture, giving them sense of context and meaning within the game world. This attention to detail adds to the overall experience and makes the game world feel more believable in so many ways that I can't explain it in words. It's just a great feeling to play this game. Overall, while it's a shame that some of the plasmids may not be as useful as others, Bioshock's gun variation and upgrades add a lot of gameplay and help to make the combat feel engaging and varied. And even those pointless plasmids fit the world story-wise, although you might never use them. Each weapon has its unique strengths and weaknesses, making them useful in different situations. Some have armor-piercing ammo, ability to set everyone aflame under a second, or a shock with shots. Then there are powerful combos like the game teaches in the very beginning. Shock an enemy and hit them to the head with a wrench is extremely powerful and often one-hit combo on simple enemies. Another examples would be the incinerate plasmid to set enemies on fire and then finish them off with a shotgun blast. The cyclone trap plasmid can be used to create vortexes that pulls enemies towards it, allowing players to take them down with a grenade or another explosive weapon when they are extremely still. Of course, as I've played games a lot, min-maxing is easy to notice in this kind of game. It has some very hard edges on balancing. The best weapons seem to be pistol and Tommy gun, because they are basically hit scan weapons. Tommy gun doesn't even need a recoil reduction upgrade, as you can just tap the Tommy gun as fast as it shoots, and by not holding it down, the recoil doesn't affect you, so you can just use it as a machine gun without recoil. Pistol can also be shot as fast as you can by tapping the finger, and it just becomes overpowered. Bioshock features a decent variety of enemies, although some players may find that there is a bit of repetition in types of enemies they encounter throughout the game. The most common enemy type in Bioshock are the Splicers, mutated humans who have become addicted to Adam, a genetic material that grants special abilities. There are several types of Splicers, each with their own unique abilities and behavior, such as melee-focused Duggy Splicers, the agile Houdini Splicers, and the long-range Nitro Splicers. Another common enemy type are the Big Daddies, massively heavily armored beings who are tasked with protection of the Little Sisters, young girls who harvest Adam from corpses. There are several types of Big Daddies, each with their own unique abilities and weapons, such as melee-focused Bouncer and the long-range Rosie. Other enemies in the game include security cameras and turrets, as well as the game's final boss, which I'm not going to talk about. Overall, while the Bioshock's enemy variety is not necessarily the most diverse, like there's only a handful of enemies, it's diverse enough and keeps the game like it fits again with the game's lore. The different types of enemies do provide some variety in gameplay and keep things interested. as the players progress through the game. And with the enemies, also the research and camera that you use, it wouldn't fit the game if there would be a larger variety of enemies. I think that would become extremely tedious to track on what enemies you have photographed and whatnot. Let's talk about the reception a little bit, because Bioshock is generally considered a highly acclaimed and influential game. It's not without its flaws. I gathered some complaints actually people had with the game. I might not completely agree with these, but I understand these examples to a certain degree. Repetitive gameplay. Some players have criticized Bioshock's gameplay as repetitive, with a limited range of enemies and environments. And this comes back to the enemies category I just talked about. Like it's handful of enemies, and if you don't use the research camera and such, it definitely feels like there's no reason not to have more enemy types. But then again, if there would be some monsters or mutations and such, it would break the game's mode a little bit more. Second complaint was limited use of plasmids. While plasmids are a unique and interesting aspect of Bioshock, some players criticize the limited use of them, like I said, like the bee swarm. Like it just some plasmids are more useful than others, and players may end up relying on the same few plasmids throughout the game. And this is 100% true. Like it's just, I don't think there's anyone who argues with this. Uneven difficulty. Bioshock's difficulty can be uneven at times, with certain sections of the game feeling much harder or easier than others. I personally thought the game was never too hard, as the life chamber system makes it pretty much impossible to fail, as when you die you will be revived the closest chamber to your current location. If you turn this setting off from the game menu, I can see the issue. But with playing the original and remastered, I only died once in the original, and that was mainly due to the lack of proper mouse and keyboard control. Controls on the original port are quite poor if you're not using a controller pad, as the mouse movement is extremely Xbox 360 and PS3 era PC port feeling, if you know what I mean. Basically feeling like there's a lot of dead zone and stuttering when you are moving your mouse. Remastered version fixed this issue completely, and popping heads was easy as ever. Limited exploration. While Bioshock's world of Rapture is immersive and engaging, some players criticize the limitation exploring opportunities. The game is fairly linear, and players may not have the freedom to explore as much as they would like. The game is definitely more on the linear side, with a very limited amount of exploration, but I think this helps with the story to be told in more cohesive way. Technical issues. Like any game, Bioshock is not immune to technical issues. Some players reported issues with the game's performance, including lag crashes and other glitches. I do remember on the Xbox 360 I had constantly crash, like the game crashed constantly, and it was so frustrating. But the game was so good that I still played it through. Overall, while these issues may detract from the overall experience of playing Bioshock for some players, many still consider it to be highly enjoyable and groundbreaking game that paved the way for future immersive sims and first-person shooters. Crashing is something that causes me again almost to quit, especially in the original one, but even during the end of the remastered it started crashing, so I just quick saved after everything I did. Like every corner I took, every enemy mob group I killed, I quick saved, and it did become frustrating certainly. When Bioshock was first released in 2007, its graphics were considered highly impressive and significant improvement over other games at the time. The game's art style, which combined 1960s and 1950s aesthetics with horror and sci-fi elements create a unique and memorable atmosphere that still holds up today. The game's use of lightning and shadow along with the detailed textures and models help to create a dark and foreboding atmosphere in the underwater city of Rapture. The use of color and contrast also adds the game's visual appeal and helps to highlight the key features of the elements. One of the key features on Bioshock 1's graphics is the use of water effects. As the game is set in an underwater city, water is constant presence and is used to create great effect, and its game's visuals without the water would be nothing special. The water is realistically rendered with waves, reflections and distortion effects, which create a sense of immersion and reality. Of course, to this date, these effects have a little bit, let's just say, become less realistic, and but they are still, like, overall the whole art style holds up extremely well, and the water effects just fit that 2007 era of game releases. The character models in Bioshock 1 are quite highly detailed with intricate facial animation and realistic movements. The enemies in the game are particularly memorable with grotesque and disturbing designs that add to the game's horror element and tell again a huge amount of the story that why these certain peoples are still alive in this underwater city. However, by today's standards, Bioshock graphics may not be as impressive as they once were, while the game's art style and atmosphere still hold up well. Some players may find the graphics to be somewhat dated or lacking in detail compared to most recent games, of course. On the other hand, I absolutely loved the visuals in the game, and playing it on 4K was a blast even today. It looks so good. It's one of those games that I don't think a remake would do it any good, as the original holds up so well in its style. That being said, it's worth noting that Bioshock graphics are not the most important aspect of the game. The game's storytelling, engaging gameplay and immersive world building are what have made it the classic and influential game that it is. Okay, so let's talk about the story. It's extremely central part of what makes the game such a beloved classic. It takes place in an underwater city of Rapture, a once thriving metropolis built by visionary entrepreneur Andrew Ryan. Ryan designed Rapture as a utopian society free from governmental regulations and the limitations of traditional morality. The city was meant to be a place where the most brilliant minds of humanity could gather to pursue and work free from the constraint of society. However, things have gone horribly wrong in Rapture, as you would assume, and the city has descended into chaos and violence, most people dead. As the player, you take the role of Jack, a man who finds himself stranded in Rapture after a plane crash. Jack quickly becomes embroiled in this conflict between various factions with Rapture, including the mad scientist Dr. Steinman, the ruthless businessman Sander Cohen, and the mysterious figure known as the Atlas. As Jack explores the city and uncovers the secrets of Rapture's past, he learns the truth about the origins of the city and the forces that have brought it to its current state. Along the way, he must confront the dangerous splicers and big daddies that inhabit the city, as well as the powerful figure known as Andrew Ryan. The story of Bioshock is both engaging and thought-provoking, exploring themes of power, morality, and limits of human nature. The game's revelations keep players on the edge of their seats, and the game's ending is widely regarded as one of the most memorable in video games. Though I do not think the ending in this game is what makes the story. This game's story is more about the journey to there. Because I personally did enjoy the ending. I think it's extremely well made ending, but it's just the path to get there is what made the story so good. The game uses a combination of gameplay, audio logs, and environmental storytelling to tell its story. As the player explores the city of Rapture, they will encounter various environmental clues that hint at the events that have taken place in the city. These may include bloodstains, graffiti, and abandoned objects that help to flesh out the game's world and characters. For example, as the player progresses through the medical pavilion area, they will encounter various signs of chaos and decay, such as bloodstained walls and overturned medical equipment. These environmental details help to convey the sense of desperation and the decay that has overtaken Rapture. In addition to environmental storytelling, these audio logs contain recordings of conversations between the characters' diary entries and other information of the life in Rapture. There's a couple of NPCs you interact with the game, and not all of them are in that good of a mindset anymore, but with flashbacks from those NPCs and talking with these people underwater, world is made much more interesting. Overall, Bioshock's story is told in a way that is both immersive and engaging, drawing players into the world of Rapture and keeping them invested in the game, its characters and narrative. The game's use of environmental storytelling, audio logs, and visual storytelling all work together to create rich and detailed world that players will want to explore and uncover the secrets of. If you got it to this point, I thank you for watching. Please leave a like, dislike, subscribe, and just tell me what did you like. What did you like about Bioshock? What did you like about this review? Just do that and have a nice day.